There are places across the Great Plains where history refuses to stay buried. Abandoned farmsteads, lonely cemeteries, and of course, ghost towns. Places where terrible events occurred and, according to local legend, never truly ended. Tonight on Midwest Shadow Files, we travel through Nebraska to the site of the ghost town of Spring Ranche, a place once filled with stagecoaches, wagons traveling west on the Oregon and California trails, ranchers, merchants, a railroad, and a place where vigilante justice darkened the town's history forever, notably making it the only place where a woman was lynched in Nebraska history. Come with us now as we tell the story of the haunted ghost town of Spring Ranche, Nebraska. Hello and welcome back to Midwest Shadow Files. I'm Dan, your host, and Midwest Shadow Files storyteller. And in short, tonight is quite the story. It's part true crime, part ghost story. And there is a lot to dive into with this one. So I think the thing that is most striking to me on this one is the history surrounding it. We can have 100% lore and stories that are larger than life, and then we can have the story like the one we have tonight with Spring Ranche that has a lot of truth behind it, and sad truth for sure, and a very violent one to go along with it. Now, with that said, before we dive too much further into the story, we are giving an episode warning that much of the story is violent in nature, including details of the lynching that takes place with two of the characters. This lynching, though historical in a spot of Nebraska dark history, still is graphic in nature and may not be suitable for all audiences. Consider this before listening further. Okay, so let's start at the beginning and lay a little groundwork about Spring Ranche. It was founded in 1860 by James Bainter, who built his home on the north side of the Little Blue River. And this is important as we will later learn that the town shifts. At the time, of course, it made perfect sense because the Oregon Trail was running nearby on the north side of the river, and James wanted to build close to that for the ongoing traffic going west. With settlers moving their wagons down the trail, he was quite the entrepreneur, and as he operated both a store and an inn, which was used regularly by the westward pioneer traffic, Bainter started both the first school and the first church, which both were operated out of his home. But there was danger on the horizon. They were in Cheyenne and Sioux territory, and it was only 4 years later in 1864 when Spring Ranche was completely destroyed by a native raiding party, leaving several dead and completely destroying the town. But this was not the end of the town. 10 years later, Spring Ranche was rebuilt, but this time on the south side of the river. And this is where the town's cemetery remains to this day. But, like most ghost towns across the Midwest, there is one event that caused the demise of many communities: the railroad. Now, of course, the opposite is true as well. The railroad also caused boom towns to rise, railroad towns as we call them, and ultimately you had a choice. If the railroad bypassed your town, basically killing your town, you could choose to stay or you could choose to shift and move to the area where the railroad cut through the state. These events caused what we call today as railroad ghost towns. The towns that moved typically survived, or if they didn't, the towns that refused to move, well, they basically faded into the sunset, died, and became what we call railroad ghost towns. So Spring Ranche shifted again back to the north side of the river where the St. Joseph and Grand Island Railroad built their tracks. Spring Ranche never grew very big, records showing that at their very height, they had a population of 125. Now, interesting enough, though the town was able to sustain itself with the railroad, it was ultimately later in the 1940s that the railroad still gave its fatal blow, pulling out of the area after the Great Dust Bowl laid waste to the land in the 30s. But the true black spot on the town's history came in 1885, when one of the most violent episodes in Nebraska history took place. Right after this. Hi there, Dan here. Just wanted to give a quick spotlight on what's around the corner. We have some great episodes dropping next week, and you don't want to miss them. Both are stories revolving around the folklore surrounding little people. One is based from the land of beer and cheese in Dairyland, southeastern Wisconsin, which is the story of the Haunchies of Haunchyville, a secret hidden community of ex-circus workers who created a community in the woods for them, by them, and only them. If you happen to wander into their little secret village, it wouldn't be very good, let's put it that way. So that one drops on Monday. Then on Wednesday, we get into the story of the Little Devils of Spirit Mound, a story coming from the Vermilion, South Dakota area, a folklore story that is deeply rooted, and a story that follows Lewis and Clark in their exploration of the mound, in search of the little killer arrow yielding little warriors of the grasslands surrounding the mound. Both episodes are very intriguing. They're interesting. I hope you get a chance to tune in. But for now, as we have a lot to cover tonight, let's get back to the story. Things are going pretty well in Spring Ranche, and the year was 1872, when James and Elizabeth Taylor and their family came to town. The family started farming the area, but it wasn't long before James' reckless business dealings caused Elizabeth to essentially take over the farm. Now, there are different accounts with this, but most of it point to shady deals going on between James and local ranchers in the area, and so there was bad blood beginning to brew in Spring Ranche. A few years later, James Taylor died. He apparently had been riding his horse and doubled over in pain from his stomach, fell, and was later pronounced dead. At that time, it was thought that he possibly died of complications with his diabetes, but later reports found something else. Something a little more sinister. There was something found in his system pointing to a type of potato bug poisoning. And one of the key ingredients? Arsenic. A poison of choice by many black widows. Was Elizabeth a black widow? For those not familiar with the term black widow, it's a female killer whose main weapon of choice is poison. Back then, that poison typically was arsenic. Did Elizabeth Taylor murder her own husband? Nobody knows for sure, but the rest of the story goes that Elizabeth took full control of the farm and business dealings and turned over some of those duties to her younger brother, Thomas Jones. As time went on, both Elizabeth and Thomas seemed to always be involved in some type of scandal or drama. There were disputes over land, disputes over cattle. Fences were being torn down on Elizabeth's land. And then, the biggest scandal of all. Rumors were spreading that Thomas Jones had raped a young girl in town and got her pregnant. Then, there was the issue of a local farmer's barn being burned to the ground. Many people suspected Elizabeth getting even with some of the dealings on her land. People were beginning to be more hostile to Elizabeth. Threats were given. And in response, Elizabeth bought a shotgun. Now, this is important to note here because, according to the story, it was the only shotgun in the area. Everyone else owned rifles. So clearly, the shotgun was purchased as protection. But this could only lead to something bad, and guess what? It did. A man was cutting down trees on their land for wood. When confronted, a fight broke out, and then there was a shotgun blast, which took off half of the man's head. One witness claimed it was Thomas, but another witness near the scene reported seeing Elizabeth running away from where the dead body was discovered. And the people of Spring Ranche had enough. In the early morning of March 15th, 1885, a group of men wearing hoods and donning the name the Disciples of Judge Lynch dragged both Jones and Taylor from their beds and into a field where they were beaten. They were accused of stealing cattle and other crimes until finally Elizabeth confessed that she had indeed hired someone to burn down the barn from an earlier dispute. Thomas Jones begged for his sister's life, but it was to no avail. They mounted the siblings on 2 separate horses, led them to the nearby Spring Ranch bridge, put a noose around each of their necks, tied the rope to the bridge, and without any delay, someone yielding Elizabeth's shotgun fired a round into the air, scaring the horses and leaving both Elizabeth Taylor and Thomas Jones to die by hanging. More on the hauntings of Spring Ranch coming up next. Hey, just a quick thank you to some of the recent subscribers to the channel. A quick introduction or reintroduction for some of you. We're Midwest Shadow Files, covering stories across the Midwest on the paranormal, diving into dark history, cryptids, aliens, and much more. We recently expanded from a past podcast called Iowa Shadow Files and got all creative with our new title and called it Midwest Shadow Files. I know, I got all creative on that one. It's good to expand a little further though, of course. So now bringing you 2 episodes a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. Now, we always share on this podcast that we love hearing from you. If you have any episodes you're wanting to hear, have a story to share, or even if you just want to reach out, say hi, you can always reach us at midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. That's midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. And I hope to hear from you. But for now, let's get back to the story. Okay, so a quick recap. Spring Ranch, Nebraska has gone through a lot over the years, first being destroyed by Sioux and Cheyenne, and then vigilante justice. One that gives Nebraska a black eye, historically speaking, putting Spring Ranch on the map for the location of the only woman lynched in Nebraska history. The story soon spread through the state like wildfire, and ultimately came to the discovery of some of the mob, who they were. Their names started to come out. People were outraged. They couldn't believe that this would actually happen, that vigilante justice was even legal. Where was the court proceedings? What happened? And of course, trials pursued. But ultimately, as the case was closed for lack of evidence. Both Thomas Jones and Elizabeth Taylor were buried in the Spring Ranch Cemetery, which, by the way, you can still see today. But after the lynching, strange things began to happen around Spring Ranch. And this is when the hauntings began. Now, some might speculate that maybe some of these hauntings were tied to a ghost or two hanging around after the Cheyenne and Sioux raids. There were, of course, deaths related to those raids. But let's move ahead and turn our attention to the bridge. The bridge where Elizabeth and Thomas were hung. Bridges are notorious for hauntings. Let's give a quick rundown on this topic. So this is fascinating. Bridges that are infamously haunted. You have the Screaming Bridge, also known as the Old Alton Bridge in Texas. Legends will tell you of a lynched goat farmer whose spirit remains near the bridge. Now, interesting enough, another lynching case. Then there's Emily's Bridge, also known as Goldbrook Covered Bridge. Legend has it that a young woman, named Emily of course, died near the bridge and her ghost appears to travelers, sometimes leaving scratches on their vehicles. Then you have Crybaby Bridge, which, amazing enough, there are several of these variations across the country. Maybe you are familiar with some of these, where visitors can hear the cries of an infant. Then you have Rambly Hollow Bridge, folklore speaking of ghostly figures appearing on the bridge after dark. Sox Bridge, located near the Gettysburg battlefield, reports of seeing soldiers, strange lights, and of course strange sounds. Always strange sounds. And of course I can go on and on with the different bridges. I can name at least 2 or 3 more in Iowa alone. Rainbow Bridge, the old Banyan Bridge, but they kind of messed up the story on that. That's over by Fort Dodge. Actually kind of covered on a past episode. If you go back, the Phantom Train in Terra, Iowa, which is a ghost town, the story that the local newspapers kind of shared on that and doing some research. The Banyan Bridge is no longer, by the way, which is further south than the story that they would tell. There's a different bridge. You have all sorts of bridges. And Spring Ranch is no different in this case. So the original bridge is no longer there, but there is a bridge. It's been rebuilt at the site of the old one, but regardless, the hauntings persist. Many people report on things that happen after dark. They hear whispers. Some claim they hear the sounds of ropes creaking. And then you have the sounds of something that sounds like a muffled scream. Something that if you were standing on the bridge looking down, you hear something coming up from the river below. Of course, the most common legend associated with the bridge involves hearing a woman crying. Could it be the ghost of Elizabeth Taylor? Some go on to report that beyond the crying, they hear more of a sobbing sound, something from the darkness. And of course, it seems to always be at night. Now, if anyone has ever been to Spring Ranche, I'd love to hear from you. Have you been out there? Consider emailing me. I'd love to hear your stories on this. Have you been on the bridge or near it? I'm curious if anyone has had any daytime experiences out at Spring Ranche. Drop a comment below. Now, here is how the reports go regarding the crying sounds coming from around the bridge area. They hear the sound, they go to investigate, and nobody is there. Skeptics argue that it's the wind. Now, I've been in places in both Nebraska and the Dakotas where it's definitely like that. The wind carries sounds. Places that are abandoned, ghost towns, have their own sound. Almost like the place is speaking to you. And yes, the wind can and does create eerie noises. I had one experience in a ghost town in southeast South Dakota where the very thing happened to me. I was walking around the ghost town of Argonne, South Dakota, and I was there for historical reasons to tell the story of a basketball athlete known as the Argonne Ace. His name was Delbert Gilliam. Go ahead and look that up. That's pretty interesting. He scored 72 points in a game, still holds the South Dakota single game scoring record to this day. But anyway, I was walking around getting footage, and I thought I heard some things. Was it the wind? Voices? My imagination? Who knows? But the point is this, is that noises do come from the wind and our natural surroundings. But then you have the flip side. Believers are not convinced of this. Now let's move to the second site that is said to be haunted, the cemetery. Again, this comes to absolutely no surprise. The cemetery is one of the last physical reminders that the town was even there. There's an old depot that is falling down, and perhaps it has by now, but the cemetery is still there. And like I said before, Elizabeth Taylor and Thomas Jones are both buried there. And according to paranormal investigators, it is one of Nebraska's most unsettling locations. Visitors can often claim feelings of being watched. Now, I don't know about you, but that is one of the things that I hate the most. That feeling that you are walking down a street, you feel a set of eyes on you, and it just creeps me out, you know what I mean? Even worse, you feel someone watching you, you turn and someone is staring at you from across the street. I hate that so much. But there are reports of this, and this is fairly common in a lot of different places. But there is more. Reports of cold spots. And I'm not talking in the winter, I mean in the dead middle of July, 100 degrees, cold spots. Others report hearing footsteps behind them. They turn around. Nothing. Then you have the reports from different ghost hunters or paranormal investigators that have claimed to photo unexplained lights, orbs, moving among the graves. A small handful have described shadow figures and dark figures near the graves and suddenly vanishing. Was it a trick of the light, an overactive imagination? And these same paranormal investigators share stories about electronic devices malfunctioning, sudden feelings of dread, strange lights, phantom footsteps. Not everyone is convinced, but the claims are there. And then you have the Shadow Man. Okay, so let's break this down. You have the bridge, you have the cemetery. But among Spring Ranche's legends is this Shadow Man figure, which seems to appear more than other things out around the ghost town. And the truly remarkable thing, the descriptions shared are fairly consistent. A tall, shadowy figure with no really visible features like a face or eyes, just a shadow. And some people claim that this shadow man appears near the cemetery. Some claim along the roads as you approach the town, a shadowy figure standing motionless, maybe welcoming you to Spring Ranch, I don't know. But others say it stands still. Some report the very opposite, that the figure moves fast like a blur, just out of sight of the reach of their headlights. One story shares about a group of hunters driving near the cemetery. They spotted the figure ahead. They approached to ask the man if he needed a ride, but as they approached, he disappeared. And then a second later, he reappeared, but behind their truck. Again, there is no proof, only stories, but in places like Spring Ranch, it's these stories that have the habit of surviving. And perhaps the true haunting of the ghost town isn't supernatural at all. Maybe it's historical. The entire memory almost forgotten with time. The memory of two people killed by vigilante justice. Now, whether Elizabeth Taylor and Thomas Jones were guilty is uncertain. Maybe their ghosts are impossible to prove and also remain uncertain. But what is certain is that the stories survive. The town is gone. The railroad is gone. The original bridge is gone. All of the buildings except for one, if it's still standing, is gone. But their names, Elizabeth Taylor and Thomas Jones, survive. History, refusing to be forgotten. Some visitors leave convinced they encountered something beyond any explanation. Some leave believing it's just a product of the history and a product of the imagination. But one thing almost everyone agrees on: when the ghost town on the banks of the Little Blue River begin to settle for the night, and the sun drops, and the darkness emerges, Spring Ranch feels different. Is it haunted? What do you think? Drop a comment below or shoot me an email at midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It's something each visitor must decide for themselves. This episode of the Haunted Ghost Town of Spring Valley Ranch was written, recorded, and produced by me, myself, and I. I'm Dan, your host and Shadow Files storyteller. And this is Midwest Shadow Files.